A very good evening, and thank you everyone for joining Shmiras Halashon. We are starting in chapter 19 of Mesilas Yesharim, and the topic, as it's titled, is Chasidus. I've been told that one of my great problems is that I'm not controversial. So we're going to start off by being controversial. Okay? The translation for this chapter is Saintliness, and I disagree. It's not saintliness. We can discuss what it is, but for now we're going to stick to the Hebrew word, which is Chasidus. What is a Chasid? What's the root word of Chasid? Chesed. What is Chesed? You didn't think you were going to get away with that. What's Chesed? Kindness. Okay? What is the essence of kindness?
Giving.
Giving. Very good. I'm glad I keep prodding. Going beyond the letter of the law. Giving. I'm not obligated. I'm giving. I'm a giving person. Sometimes you could even be giving by not giving. Giving emotionally. By controlling yourself and not screaming at somebody when you want to. You're giving. Right? Chesed as a concept. And a person who practices this is a Chasid. Okay? One can only guess that the founders of the modern groups of Hasidim were somehow striving to set this motto as their hallmark. And whether they did or didn't, but that's where it's coming from. There is a joke that my kids love. A person from down south comes to New York, and he sees people walking on the street, and he says, "Who are they?" And he's told they are Asidim. And he says, "I see them too, but what are they?" In any case, I prefer translating the chapter of Chasidus as, you with me? Chasidus. Okay? Because it has the root word chesed, and it's very quick to appreciate what the character trait we're talking about is, whereas I would venture to say that the translation called saintliness leaves me totally in the dark. Tonight's session is sponsored by the Sokolins in honor of Dovi's bar mitzvah, and I could tell you it was one sumptuous event. No, seriously. The bar mitzvah itself. Very, very exciting to watch a young man grow up and take responsibility as his parents and his parents' friends, as part of the Jewish community, and we are looking forward to great things from both him and his siblings. Mazel tov to you. Reb Michal Twersky, who one can arguably say is a Chassid, was once asked, "Where do you come to call yourself a Chassid? A Chassid in traditional literature? Before the past 400 years, but before that, the word Chassid was reserved for the greatest of people. Rabbi Yehuda ha-Chassid, Rabbi Yehuda the Chassid. Wow! How can you call yourself a Chassid? Isn't it an act of haughtiness to call yourself a Chassid? And he gave such a beautiful answer. He said, when you have a train that goes to Florida, what's it called? The Florida train. When you get on the train in Philadelphia, what's it called? It's called the Florida train, even though you're not there yet. They said, we're called Chasidim because we're on the Chassid train, even if we're not there yet. And it is such a powerful concept. We're on a train. We're going to find out what it means to be a Chassid, and then we're going to get on the train. You might be at the first station, might be at the second station. It makes no difference. But you're on that train. You're going in that direction. This is what you consider valuable. There's an amazing story of a Hasidic Rebbe who shows up at an inn on a terrible wintry night. He shows up, the innkeeper is very excited. Of all the types of guests he can have, the Rebbe is here. Not only is it prestige, but he's going to be a paying customer. Everything's going to be great. And he serves the Rebbe, and he's thrilled. About halfway through the meal, there's a knock at the door. A meek knock. If you're not listening for it, you wouldn't even hear it. The innkeeper, very sensitive to knocks at the door. This is his livelihood. He hears it. He goes running for the front door, opens up, and there stands a disheveled, homeless Jew. And he says, please come in, please come in. And he sees this gentleman is hesitating. He says, are you sure I can come in? He says, sure, come in. He says, I don't think you understand. What's the problem? He says, I can't pay. So the innkeeper thinks for a moment and figures, listen, I mean, what's the difference? The poor guys went there, come in. And he walks in. He says, you know what? The soup's cooking on the fire anyway. Listen, I have nothing to lose. Come on. The beds are made anyway. Come on in. And he welcomes this poor Jew in, sits him down, feeds him, tells him where his room is going to be. And it's very nice. It's an act of chesed, right? At the end of the meal, after this innkeeper thinks he's done it all, the Jew calls him over and says, sir, I really appreciate your hospitality. Don't get me wrong. I'm really thankful for what you did for me. Even if I'd be a paying customer, you did well. Certainly, I'm not even paying. I have a question for you, though. I was outside. It was a long journey. I'm really cold still. My bones, I'm cold. Do you think you could give me a cup of schnapps? So the innkeeper thinks. He says, okay. He goes to the back room, pours the schnapps, looks at it, pours it on the ground. Takes another one from the keg, looks at it, dumps it on the ground. Takes a third one, and suddenly he seems satisfied. And he brings it over to this Jew, says, L'chaim, enjoy it. Jew drinks, he's happy, goes to his room to retire for the night. And the innkeeper didn't realize, but the Rebbe had been watching the whole thing. Come here for a minute. Sit down. And the innkeeper sits down, and the Rebbe asks him, what just happened? He says, what do you mean, what just happened? This guy came in, huh? What do you mean, what just happened? He says, I don't understand what happened. The food, the bed, I understand. The schnapps. Why did you drop the first two on the floor? Schnapps is expensive. The innkeeper says, oh, that. Yeah. The food I was able to give with a full heart. It's cooking there anyway. There are no visitors tonight. It's a snowstorm. What's the difference? Might as well be nice. The beds, they're made anyway. What's the difference? I don't lose anything. It's just a matter of having a good heart. But the schnapps, I must tell you, schnapps doesn't go bad. I could wait for a paying customer. Where does this guy have to come and ask me for schnapps? A freeloader. And the first cup that I pulled, I was being stingy still. I wasn't giving it with a full heart. And to do a mitzvah like that, that's not the way you do a mitzvah. And I dumped it. I have no use for such mitzvahs. And I poured a second one, and I still felt a little resentful. Where does he come to ask me for schnapps and put me on the spot? And I dumped it. That's not the way you do a mitzvah. By the third one, I was able to give it with a full heart. And I brought it to him, and I gave it to him. I believe that's Chasidus. Chasidus is to be on the train on which you say, that mitzvah is still imperfect. It's not there yet. And I want to be there. Not everybody can afford to dump the mitzvah. I'd rather we do an imperfect mitzvah. That's a pretty bold, confident step to say, I know if I keep trying, I'm going to get it right. But either way, to be on the train to get there. You're a chassid. You're on the chassid train. On the topic of Shmiras Halashon, I don't know how many times you hear it. I hear it very often. People tell me they got a call, a reference call. They had to give an answer. They weren't sure what answer to give because they know some things about the person, but they're not sure that they're relevant, and the person once hurt them. But we all have fallouts in life. That doesn't mean it's a bad person. And they tell me exactly what they said and how they weighed their words and what they did. And they want to know if they did the right thing. And I want to tell you, whatever the answer is, you might not yet be in Florida, but you're on the Florida train. You're on the Chassid train. Because if you're paying attention to that and it makes a difference, and you're prepared to say, they're wonderful people, but it's a little busy here right now. I'd be glad to talk more with you in an hour. And you hang up and you sort out your emotions, you're on the chassid train. Because you're trying to get that mitzvah crafted to perfection. Reb Baruch Ber Leibowitz had a daughter who was engaged to someone in yeshiva, and after the engagement was announced, someone convinced this young man that he could have done better. So he broke the engagement. Now, I've heard of people breaking engagements, by Facebook, by Twitter, by texting. How disgusting can you get? You can't do it in person if you have to do it. Anyway, this gentleman broke the engagement by letter, parcel post, in which he sent back the engagement gifts that the Leibowitz family had given him. And he just sent them back, and my deepest apologies, but the engagement is off. Okay. A few years later, this gentleman comes to Rabbi Leibowitz for a reference letter. He learned in the yeshiva. He's trying to get a job. He needs a reference letter. So Rabbi Leibowitz wrote it. And then he came to the yeshiva and he showed it to 3 people and asked, is there any anger in the letter? Did I withhold any praise in the letter? Reb Reuven Grozovsky, his son-in-law, tremendous personality, he says he read that letter. He was one of the 3 people asked. He says the letter was glowing. To the point that he said, Rosh Hashiva, to this person? And Rabbi Leibowitz said, he's a good person. He wronged me. It still hurts. He's a good person. No reason he can't take a job. Now, this is like a magic trick. Don't practice this at home. Some people that break engagements like that, I would stay away from them. You have to know your people. But Rabbi Leibowitz apparently, he was a dean of an academy. He knew his people. He felt that as disgusting as it was, it doesn't mean that the person is a bad person. And that, I believe, is the most challenging factor in Shmiras Halashon. Because it's life and death. If what happened to you is an expression of who the person is, then you're going to have to get the anger out of here and figure out how to relate the information. Because someone can suffer deeply if you don't. On the other hand, you were wronged by a fallout. Doesn't make the person a bad person. I just tried to bring this theme out in the high school with the boys. we came across a certain king by the name of Azariah in the second book of Malachim. He's a king, and he wants to be the Kohen also. He wants to be the Kohen Gadol, the priest. So he gets his ketoris ready, his incense, and he starts walking into the inner chamber of the Beis HaMikdash, and the Kohanim, tens of them, are trying to stop him, and he's just doing his thing. He's going to bring the ketoris. He has a thing that the king should serve the king, and he's the king, so he's going to serve Hashem, and he's got it all worked out, but he's not a descendant of Aaron HaKohen, and he doesn't belong doing this. And he's walking in and he's doing it. And as he walks in and he crosses the threshold, Hashem placed saras on his forehead. Now, you lived in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Someone gets saras. That's pretty awesome. The king to get saras, just as he's trying to do this violation, this is newsworthy. This is real scary. Hand of God right in front of you. They see it. He realizes what happened, and he walks out. He's devastated. He's wrong. And he spends the rest of his time as king in the cemetery, because he has tzaras, so he's off limits. So he's running the government, as a king from the cemetery. His son takes over. They try to work it out. It's wild. After his passing, his son is recorded as being a righteous person, good person, nice person, special person. Special and good and righteous, just like his father. I said to the boys, huh? The man walked in to the Beis HaMikdash trying to be a Kohen. He was struck with saras. He was leveled, placed in the cemetery for the rest of his reign. And it was a long reign. Some 50 years. And you're calling him righteous? And what's the answer? Yeah. He did something wrong. It was serious. God's hand struck him. But that's not the whole person. Person does something wrong, he might still be a good person. Right? The first thing we learn in education, in parenting. Don't tell the kid that they're bad just because they did something bad. The person is not bad because they did something bad. The good person who did something bad. You did something wrong. You made a mistake. You got to build a whole vocabulary. And that's the same thing in Shmiras HaLashon. What kind of person is the person? And when you ask that question, you start having to work out whether they are truly bad or even bad in this area, or was I just rubbed the wrong way? What has happened since then? A million questions. Because as the expression goes, someone's life is in your hands, depending on what you say. So the concept of Chasidus is that we're trying to get it right. We're not satisfied merely to do observance, to meet the specs, but barely. We are trying to do the mitzvah correctly. A good English translation might be to focus on relationships. It's a relationship. Any relationship you have, a friend, a spouse, parent-child, boss-worker, any relationship. You want to barely make specs, or you want to build that relationship. I have the cute story we always say, husband never says that he loves his wife. So they come to the rabbi, and the rabbi, do you love your wife? He says, 18 years ago when we got married, I told her that I loved her. If anything changes, I'll let her know. That's not called building a relationship. One can even contemplate that Hashem makes us sleep every night so that we have the opportunity to wake up in the morning and say, good morning. Imagine if it was one long day of 500 hours. It's a relationship. And in relationships, there are many different nuances. You could have relationship number 1, you could have relationship number 10, you could have relationship that's 100%. That's really there. And that depends what you put into it. He goes on, it's a very long chapter. He says, for example, even something like so simple, not to use a shul as a shortcut. Sometimes, depending where the shul is situated, you want to get from one side to the other, just walk through the sanctuary. I do that. Why not? I'll daven when I'm supposed to. I'll give charity when I'm supposed to. Why can't I use it as a shortcut? Disrespectful. It's a nuance. It's not a walkway. And that's the halacha. You walk through a shul to call somebody or to use it as a shortcut. You have to sit down and use it for a mitzvah. You have to sit down, make yourself comfortable for a few moments so that you came in respectfully. And there's so many, examples of that, where the mitzvah you could skim by, or you could do it correctly. There's a fascinating concept called hidur mitzvah. Hidur mitzvah means that after you've decided how much the mitzvah costs, you add on a certain percentage and you do an upgrade. I once brought a gentleman in the community to buy a pair of tefillin for himself. So the sefer showed him a pair that's acceptable. So he had just graduated our Hebrew reading crash course, and he looks at the tefillin and says that the letters aren't big enough for him to tell the difference between a dalet and a resh. So the sefer shrugged, like it's okay, it's good. I mean, anybody who knows letters and it's kosher, it's good. Yeah, but I can't tell. He says, what's the level up? A little bit bigger. And he showed it to him. He says, now I can see the letters. And he bought the upgrade. That's what he wanted to do. You're obligated, we can discuss it. But that's the attitude of Chasidus. I want a mitzvah that I can be proud of. You gave the schnapps to the person, but your emotional state is also, all the intangibles also go into the mitzvah. Let's look at the text of the Mesilas Yeshar. Chelkei HaChasidus HaRashiyim, the primary aspects of Chasidus, Shlosha, there are 3. Harishon b'maisa, the first is how you do a mitzvah. the act. Hasheni ba'ofen asiya, all the side issues that go into doing it. Hashlishi b'kavana, what your intent was when you did the mitzvah. Hachelek harishon b'maisa, the first one that has to do with the action. Afhu yischalek l'shnei chalakim, you could subdivide that. Bein adam la'makom, mitzvahs between us and Hashem. And Hasheni, mitzvah shebein adam la'chavero, interpersonal between us and our fellow. In the second paragraph, in Yano, the theme of this first section is Kiyum kol ha-mitzvahs b'chol ha-diktukim shebahem ad makom sheyad adam magas. To do the detail of the mitzvah to the extent physically possible. We're interested in detail. I would venture to say that you could actually just use it almost as a process. Your starting point is that you know about a mitzvah. After you know about the mitzvah, start asking yourself, do I know its details? A person knows to light Shabbos candles. Great. Ask yourself, do I know its details? Because every mitzvah has details. What's the correct time? What's the correct way? How do you wave your hands? What are you supposed to have intent when you wave your hands? What are you supposed to pray for afterwards? Is there a special way to say the bracha? Is there a difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov? Details. And a person who is striving to craft the mitzvah correctly is going to work on that. I said over in Shul this week, I believe, very cute story about an Aish rabbi. Right? Aish.com. Ask the rabbi. So someone meets him at a dinner and says, Rabbi, I don't understand. This was years ago when email was just starting. He says, I sent you an email question and you never responded. You could tell it's when email just started, because nowadays with spam, big deal, I didn't respond, leave me alone. I sent you an email and you question and you didn't respond. He says, who did you send it to? What do you mean? I sent it to Rabbi at Aish, DOTCOM. You told Aish.com. He says, yeah, but that little dot is very important. Sometimes detail makes a difference. It's just not going to get there if it doesn't have the precision. The chassid is interested in finding out how to craft the mitzvah correctly. Karam chachamim, the sages referred to this as sheyarei mitzvah, the leftovers of the mitzvah, the secondary, the extra little bit of accuracy in the correct way to do a mitzvah. Sheyarei mitzvah ma'akvim es haparonos. A person who's careful about the detail, that saves him from problems in life. It's a special protection. Ki af al pi sheguf ha-mitzvah nishlam, even though the essence of the mitzvah has been completed, zulasam, without these details, technically you're okay. Ukvar yatsa baze yidei chavaso, and you fulfilled your obligation. Hineza l'chol hamon Yisrael. That's for the general population. Acha Chasidim, but the people who are on this train called Chasidus, ein lohem ela laharbos b'hashlamasam, they're all interested in increasing the completeness of the mitzvah, v'lo l'mayit b'hem klal, and never to cut corners. They're trying to do the mitzvah right. I'd like to share with you another story that I think will segue us back to Shmiras HaLashon. A father, very wealthy man, his wife passes away unfortunately. After a few years, he's ready to remarry. And he sends a letter overseas to his children that he would like them to come for this wedding. And he would like to be able to introduce the children to his wife-to-be and be there at the wedding and introduce to the new family. And he writes in the letter, any expenses that you take in my honor, I will gladly reimburse. Just come in style, respectably, so that I can be proud. The three brothers, two of them are fairly well-to-do, and they figure if everything is reimbursed anyway, so they go out, they get all the kids new shoes, they get everybody new suits. They're going to come in style. It's going to be reimbursed. The third brother is poor. Bit of a schlepper. He wouldn't even know where to go shopping if you gave him the credit card. And they show up for the chasna, and the father introduces the first son. This is my first son. He lives in so. Fine, yeah, great, very nice. This is my second son. Very nice. The third son walks in with his children, and the father's all embarrassed. Says, and this is my third son. And of course, the Kala is very courteous and smiles, and everything's fine, but the father's devastated. How could this happen? After the chasna, the children come, and they want reimbursement. And the father says, nothing doing. And these first two children pull out the letter. What do you mean? It says in the letter everything is going to be reimbursed, and it's your signature, Dad. How can you do this to us? He said, let's read the letter. It says anything in my honor. My honor. Right? How in the world can you buy for yourselves and not make sure that your younger brother is provided for with dignity? Did you see the embarrassment that I had when he walked in? You didn't do it in my honor. If you did it in my honor, you would have done it for him too. You did it for yourselves, thinking I would cover the bill. Well, it's not in my honor. I have no obligation. Part of Shmiras HaLashon is realizing that we're all children of Hashem. And Hashem says, you're opening your mouth to talk now. Are you speaking in my honor? There's a road here in Maple Shade that I often drive on the way home from doing carpool. They put up a sign there near the school. It says, please drive like your kids go to school here. Apparently it's a thoroughfare, and the kids are crossing, and a lot of people from out of the neighborhood are using it, please drive like it's your kids crossing the street. Hashem says, please talk in my honor. Think of it that the person you're talking about is my son, just like you're my son. And when you do, it colors the perception, the sensitivity, and hopefully the accuracy with which we speak, either to protect the listener or to protect the person we're speaking about, but to try to be accurate. I'll ask you to turn your attention to the handout, which is a translation of a section in the book of Chavetz Chaim, section of Rechilus, and we'll just run through it, and I think you'll see what it is that the Chavetz Chaim is grappling with. One of the beautiful things about this passage is that sometimes things that to us are elementary, of course it's a bad thing and it needs to be reported because it could do damage, is actually totally not a bad thing. And we need to have the Torah perspective before we decide whether it's bad or not. Let's see. If a person sees that Reuven wants to partner with Shimon, and Shimon doesn't realize that Reuven is careless with other people's money, he should notify Shimon according to the words, the rules that we've outlined. Which rules is he referring to?
It's constructive.
Good, it's constructive. And what did we learn? That it has nothing to do with whether the people ask you for help or not. If you see somebody walking into a dangerous situation, and you know this with clarity, that is dangerous, then you're supposed to notify them even if they didn't ask you. Right? However, if a downtrodden person wants to partner with someone, you have no right to reveal his financial situation. In the first case, you were saving someone from harm because the person was careless with money. In this case, however, there is no reason to believe that the partnership will cause him damage. Just because the person is downtrodden, he's poor, doesn't mean it's going to cause you damage. As long as he can meet his responsibilities, which may be to run the store or whatever. But if you say, oh, he's so poor, the person might decide, well, I guess that might be some reason that I shouldn't associate with. Like, they're not even sure why you're connecting the dots. And that's destructive. The fact that he is now tight financially does not mean that he won't have success in this endeavor. On the contrary, maybe Hashem will now have mercy on him. In fact, there's reason to believe that no damage will come to the partner because such a partnership is an act of tzedakah. And this is true even if he doesn't realize that he's doing tzedakah because he doesn't realize the guy is poor. But the fact is he's helping somebody. To be concerned that because he's downtrodden, he will therefore not be honest and jump to that conclusion is unreasonable. Does a person who's downtrodden automatically lose his good reputation? If it's only a far-fetched fear, then the rule of who says his blood is redder than his would apply, and you have no right to intervene. How do you know who's hurting who? Consider, for example, how the Torah deals with a person who won't loan money because Shemitah is approaching. That's a very real fear. The loan is going to be annulled, the rules of Shemitah. Yet you're called wicked, Bili Ya'al in Hebrew, if you don't do a loan because you're afraid you're not going to get paid back. What does concern me is if the person is downtrodden and people have lost money because of his great poverty, and the potential partner doesn't know this, that he's going to take money from the business to pay for food for himself, that's a whole different ball game. But you need to know if that's really a concern. A quick example of how delicate it is. Okay, any questions? I'll bargain with you. If I shut off the recording system, will there be any questions? Let's try. On or off? Okay.